call the meeting to order. First, I'll ask Councillor Ralco to say the prayer, and I'd like to ask you to remain standing for a moment out of respect for the passing of Mrs. Rita Raynard, the mother of His Worship Dan Raynard. Thank you.
As we gather, we recognize that we are on Treaty 3 lands which are steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations and Métis people today. We continue to be thankful for the partnerships with our Indigenous people. We give thanks for the many blessings we enjoy in the city of Kenora. We seek wisdom in our minds, clearness in our thinking, truth in our speaking, and always love in our hearts, so that we may try always to unite the citizens of Kenora. Let these principles guide us in our decision making.
Public information notices. As required under notice bylaw number 144-2007, the public is advised of Council's intention to adopt the following at today's meeting. 1. Amend the 2019 capital budget to withdraw funds from the Roads Reserve in the amount of $16,200 plus applicable taxes to offset the cost of the consultant work related to an aggregate pit extension on Ritchie Road project. 2. Amend the tariff of fees and charges bylaw, Schedule D, to increase water and sewer rates by 5.5% in 2020 and give effect to new sewer and water service fees for multiplex units and properties serviced by 1 meter with multiple individual living units on a parcel of land. 3. Amend the 2019 operating and capital budget to withdraw funds from the Arts Center capital funds in the amount of $779,842 to offset the cost of this construction and related capital expenses. Amend the 2019 operating and capital budget to withdraw additional funds from Roads Reserve in the amount of $10,000 for additional CCTV works and LDS flushing. Rename a portion of what is locally known as First Street South from Chipman Street to Park Street to Thistle Drive. Reconfirm the January 2010 resolution declaring Town Island as surplus to the needs of the municipality and direct administration to proceed with a competitive RFP process for the sale of Town Island. Is there any member of council that has any declaration of pecuniary interest at today's meeting or at a previous meeting? Seeing none. We have confirmation of the previous council minutes.
Sorry, Your Worship. Resolution number 1 moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that the following minutes of the Council of the City of Kenora be adopted as circulated. Regular Council, August 13, 2019. Special Council, September 10, 2019.
All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we have a pleasant task to do today. We have a presentation to Darby Spicer, a lifeguard with the Kenora Recreation Center, and I'll just read a little bit to give the overview and then and ask Darby to come up. So if you want to come up, then I'll be with you, and if you don't mind, I'll read this when we're standing together. Sure.
Yeah, right in front here.
Darby Spicer was teaching a standard first aid course at the Kenora Recreation Center on May 25th, 2019, when he was called to another area of the facility where a woman had collapsed while playing pickleball in a tournament. Bystanders had already called 911, and 2 other pickleball players had begun CPR. So Darby, a Life-Saving Society examiner, found the AED and quickly set it up. The AED analyzed and advised a shock, which Darby administered. the other rescuers put the victim on her side, covered her with coats and sweaters, and monitored her vitals. The EMS team took over the scene when they arrived, and Darby helped provide information about the victim's condition. Shortly thereafter, she was transferred to a gurney and taken to the hospital for further treatment. The pickleball tournament continued, and Darby, an experienced life-saving professional, returned to his first aid course to continue teaching the day's lesson. For his ability to act in a life-saving emergency, the Life Saving Society is honored to present its Rescue Award of Merit of Service to Darby Spencer. To Darby Spicer. I'll just quickly read the Award of Merit. Life Saving Society, the lifeguarding experts. Rescue Award of Merit presented to Darby Spicer, who acted with resourcefulness and courage to aid in an individual in distress. I apologize, I can't read the signature of the president of the Life Saving Society, so suffice it to say he received it and is an excellent staff person for Darby. I'm going to present you with this token of our appreciation. Okay, so we'll see if they're accent. To the next part of our meeting, we have two deputations today, and I'll call on Carolyn Hudson of the Kenora Seniors Coalition Age Friendly Steering Committee to make her deputation. And Carolyn, you've been here before, so just a reminder that it's 5 minutes for the deputation, and council does not engage in questions and discussion following the, but you know the regime.
Yes,
So thank you, Carolyn.
Good afternoon, City of Kenora Councilors. My name is Carolyn Hudson. I am the president of the Kenora Seniors Coalition and a member of Kenora's Age Friendly Steering Committee. I am making this presentation on behalf of the almost 20% of Kenora's population that is 65 and over. I would like to acknowledge the help of the members of the Coalition's Housing Subcommittee in the preparation of this deputation. Kenora seniors have one overarching question for our mayor and council. What is your plan for expediting the construction of affordable rental accommodation for middle-income seniors? Our specific questions for mayor and councilors are: 1, what do you see as the most viable development structure based on the needs of our community? One large development that houses varying levels of assistance and accommodation, such as Benedictson Court, or more of a campus-style development with specific buildings for varying levels of assistance? 2, what area of our community is seen as most desirable for such a development? Would that area be within walking distance to downtown and shopping or events? Or would that area be close to Pinecrest, which is a more secluded and private area when thinking of outdoor green space and its potential desirability to the residents of the development? 3, on what do councilors intend to base the number of units required to immediately meet the needs of the community, or to meet the needs of the community at 5 years from present, 10 years, etc.? This is an important consideration for members of the board when determining if a large capacity development is most ideal, or if smaller phased builds would be the most economical way to move forward. 4, what is the Kenora District Services Board's involvement in the work of the new Kenora Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board, and what level of investment or rental capacity would the KDSB be interested in? 5, what does the new Kenora Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board consider affordable rent for the 2 levels of independent living and assisted living? 6, is the new Kenora Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board planning to pursue government or private funding for its affordable housing projects? In his 2018 State of Housing Report for the city, Adam Smith identified these 3 problems. 1. The failure of housing production to keep up with existing demand, particularly in regards to affordable rental units. 2. A risk of homelessness for low-income households due to the combination of high rental rates and housing prices in private developments and a long waiting list for subsidized housing. 3. The issue of affordability based on the aging of Kenora's existing housing stock, resulting in higher energy costs and repairs. Adams' State of Housing Report also indicated that there is sufficient land to accommodate the projected housing unit demand to the year 2031, while leaving some additional supply if demand increases as a result of new economic development. There are a number of viable properties that could be made available for either affordable housing or housing project development. Page 18, the 2018 State of Housing Report. Because we are not getting any younger and have advocated for affordable housing in our community for many years, the Kenora Seniors Coalition would like to see the new members of the Kenora Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board move forward as quickly as possible with new construction. Please, no more consultation. We want to see action on affordable housing. In addition, the Kenora Seniors Coalition and the Age-Friendly Steering Committee would like the members of the board to keep the public fully informed of their plans as much as appropriately possible. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Carolyn. I just will take the deputation you made and respond to some of your questions, but I just want to assure you and members of the Seniors Coalition and the Age-Friendly Committee that the city is actively involved with resources in pursuing housing opportunities. And as you well know, the city doesn't build houses, but city and council and staff are fully engaged with potential developers in discussing opportunities. However, some of those discussions have to remain confidential until the developers come forward, but be assured that this council is very aware of the seriousness of the lack of housing and is actively pursuing it, so thank you. Okay, our next deputation, Mr. Wes Siemens, and in fairness to Wes, he had approached council or the city earlier in the week to ask if he could have a couple of extra minutes for his deputation. So Wes, based on what you shared, we'll give you 8 minutes. Appreciate that. Okay. Wes, just before you start, when you're finished, could you please forward a copy of?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Ready? Okay. Good afternoon, council members. Many of my tenants who are not from the trailer park were not able to be here today because they either have to work or plenty of them actually have mobility issues. They're not able to actually necessarily get out, but I really do appreciate the ones that were able to make it. Before I begin here, I would like to make it clear at the outset here that the way the water billing works for the park is the tenants are responsible for the water that they use. So every dollar that they incur, it is passed straight through to them. So it's not me we're talking about here. We are talking about my tenants. I received an email from Mr. Jeff Hawley, the city operations manager, on Thursday before the September long weekend, advising that the sewer and water billing formula for Rabbit Lake Park was changing and that it would be discussed for the first time on September 10th at the Committee of the Whole meeting. The effective date is supposed to be January 1st, 2020. I want to repeat that. The first time the trailer park water billing change was ever mentioned by city staff publicly or to me was in the letter dated August 29th. The previous bylaw from this past June, that I'm sure we're all familiar with, was called individual meters in buildings of 4 or more units, and never discussed trailer parks or any other properties other than multi-residential buildings. You can take a look at the copy of the minutes, but everyone who was here is fairly familiar with it. And then I can assure you that I pored over all the documentation to see if it was in there, because I was very interested to know if my park was going to be part of that. In the letter that Jeff sent me on August 29th, the city added a phrase, and it was called a single water meter servicing to multiple standalone units, and also put the words trailer courts and alike in brackets. I understand that the city now wish they would have included Rabbit Lake Trailer Park in that, but they didn't. Also, if this property is being added retroactively to the last 12 months of discussion, why wasn't it put in at the same 50% calculation phased in over 3 years as the apartments were originally? Feel free to review the amended and re-amended bylaw that you guys have a copy of. Mr. Hawley suggested to the media over this past weekend that I knew this was coming all along. Everyone knows here, everything that happens in council chambers is a matter of public record. I would encourage anyone, including the media, to go and review minutes and videos and see if trailer parks was ever included or included in discussions by staff or council. I'm not sure if city staff making false statements in the media is part of something that falls under Kenora's Integrity Commissioner's responsibility, but maybe it should. Email is not the right way to inform a business of a $70,000 increase. What if this had gone to my junk mail? Does the City of Kenora have policies for notifying affected parties of huge changes? My businesses receives well over 100 bills and correspondence items from the city every year, and this is the first time the city has sent anything like this to my personal email address. Everything is always mailed or emailed to my bookkeeper with all tax bills, utilities, everything. They know how to get a hold of me. It seems very unusual. 7 business days after receiving an email, City Council talks about this issue at the Committee of the Whole for the first time, and a week later it's supposed to become a new bylaw. The only thing that was discussed last week was whether or not this should be rammed through. It was callously said, we need to rip off the Band-Aid and get it over with. These are people we're talking about. However, there were other council members that expressed concern and asked for further discussion before deciding. This mobile home park, like it or not, is the most affordable form of home ownership that exists in this city. If the narrative is it's only $15 per month, per year of an increase, it doesn't sound like a lot. We all know that. But what about if you look at the whole thing? It's an extra $1,000 per tenant per year when fully implemented. That's actually what we're talking about here. It is a big deal, and I guarantee you that $1,000 is a bigger deal to my tenants than it necessarily is to everyone on this side of the room. What is the hope here? To push these people out of their homes and onto social assistance or subsidized housing? There are some tenants that are at their breaking point. They can barely afford what they have right now. They cannot afford higher costs. Rabbit Lake Park is approximately 6 acres of land with thousands of feet of sewer and water pipe that I paid for when I purchased the property. The fact that the city wants to use my infrastructure to skyrocket their revenue on the backs of my tenants is wrong. In January, when my water lines freeze and burst and I have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on repairs, I'm quite confident the city will not be interested in helping with those costs. As I understand, the letter sent to me tries to explain a convoluted new form of charging for water that I'm told only applies to my park. It's based on a median household usage in Kenora of approximately 11.5 cubic meters per month. So what that means is if my park tenants use over the median amount, everyone's water bill will be higher than the same amount that could be used on a house on Henry Street. This is not fair, equal, or anything. This is a brand new thing that's invented. I understand for water being sold outside of the community, but we cannot, everyone talks about fairness constantly. We cannot go make up a new rate structure that's actually potentially going to pit my tenants higher than other citizens of the city. If my park, was this explained to council? It wasn't talked about during the Committee of the Whole. Maybe it was done behind closed doors, I'm not sure, but it certainly did not happen last week. Making a new higher rate structure for one property in the whole city that is potentially more expensive than all other homeowners is wrong. This letter mentions that according to satellite photos, I have approximately 80 trailers in the park. It seems odd that we're relying on Google satellite pictures that are potentially years old to form billing policy. Had city staff reached out to me, I would have met them at the property, we could have went through it, but I assumed they didn't want to tip me off that this was coming. Was this rate structure vetted with the city's attorney? Were they asked if it's okay to make a new rate policy that I'm told by more than one person that works for the city, it only applies to one property owner? So was the attorney asked, are we allowed to charge one owner more than another one, and we're actually making a new policy to do it? If it was, who was at the meeting? I'm asking as a tax-paying citizen to be shown documentation from city's attorney and that they approved a potentially more expensive new rate structure that only applies to my park. I also think that any council who hasn't seen the legal approval to do this needs to defer the decision until they have. If this passes immediately without further review, I will have a lawyer that specializes in municipal litigation take a look at this. If they agree that this is an unfair or unreasonable billing practice, I will strongly look at suing the city on behalf of my tenants. This doesn't need to happen. There is no reason to rush this thing through. Apparently mine's the only property. It's set to come through for January 1st. There's plenty of time. I also believe that there is at least one other property that should have been part of this, and there may be another one. But apparently it was just me that received this letter. Who is going to be targeted next? If I was the Hotel Association in Kenora, I'd be watching my email. Nothing has been said or announced from the city, but neither was Trailer Parks until 2.5 weeks ago. The Chamber of Commerce should also be ready that their members may be next. We have lots of buildings in Kenora with multiple commercial tenants underneath one roof, operating on one water meter. If fairness is what we're trying to do, I'm sure it's only a matter of time. I've spoken with our member of provincial parliament, the Honourable Greg Rickford. He has expressed concern to me about this water rate policy and others like it that have been instituted over the last year. He also questioned the impact that this will have on affordable housing.
Sorry, Wes.
I'm just winding up here.
That's okay.
I will also like to remind council that at this time last year, none of you have ever heard of me. I was quietly operating my business until I found out that policies were changing, my business was under attack. I am by nature not a confrontational person. But I'd like to ask you, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I followed all the rules, I took huge risks, created new housing and improved housing, and this is how I'm being rewarded. In my opinion, these actions will lead to extend Kenora's reputation for stifling development. KDSB has plenty of plans to build in the near future, but they will never be able to fix Kenora's housing needs on their own.
Wes, could I ask you just to wrap it up, please? Thank you.
Does council actually understand this formula, this rate structure for this formula, and the negative consequences and what differs from every other homeowner? With the short timeline and confusion that I've pointed out here, I ask that City Council defer this decision until it can be studied and an alternate form of billing can be found. I am and have always been willing to meet with city staff to discuss this or any other issue that involves my properties. Thank you. Should I sit down?
Yep, thanks, Wes. And Wes, I understand your last point about willingness to meet with city administration. I understand that there's a meeting confirmed for September 26th.
So there was a meeting confirmed a few days ago for September 26th, but and I'm happy to meet with that, and it's on my calendar, but if a decision is made to push this thing through today, I'm not sure what we'd be discussing. But yes, and I was happy to meet, I will be at that meeting or any other one.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you're more than welcome to stay if you wish for the discussion later on in the agenda, but it's okay for you to leave as well. It's not being destructive, so I'll leave that choice up to you. Okay. Okay, we'll proceed. And if during the meeting you find that you need to leave, I just ask that you do it quietly. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our first resolution, number 2, please.
Resolution number 2, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Poirier, that council hereby accepts the resignation of Graham Chase from the Kenora Planning Advisory Committee effective immediately, and further that council hereby appoints Peter Fox to the Planning Advisory Committee for a term at the pleasure of council.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 3.
Resolution number 3, Your Worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Poirier. The council hereby accepts the monthly financial statements of the Corporation of the City of Kenora at July 31st, 2019.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 4.
Resolution number 4, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallaham. The council hereby directs administration to work with One Investment to bring information back to council related to a new investment policy statement and agreements associated with establishing a new joint investment board and implementing the prudent investor regime.
All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 5.
Your Worship, resolution number 5, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that council hereby approves section 357 tax adjustments with potential refunds totaling $3,905.51.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 6.
Your Worship, resolution number 6, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallaham. That is recommended by BMA Management Consulting, Inc. in the Water and Wastewater Long-Range Financial Plan Forecast, approved by council resolution on November 17, 2015. The 2020 water and sewer rates be increased by 5.5% over the 2019 rates, and further that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144/2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to amend the tariff of fees and charges bylaw to increase water and sewer rates by 5.5% in 2020. And further that council give 3 readings to a bylaw for this purpose, and further that these rates shall take effect and come into force on January 1st, 2020, and further that bylaw number 118-2019 be hereby repealed. Your Worship, can I make a comment? Okay. I guess I can sit. I'm gonna move this recommendation, and I'm gonna vote for it. Not because I want to levy 5.5% increase on all the citizens of Kenora that have water and sewer bills, but I'll explain my rationale, and I'm going to support this for this year, because if I don't support it now, I can't support the budget in 2020, which is the water and wastewater management budget, utility budget, and there's a lot of other good things that are going to happen in that budget, but I just want the rest of council to know we have to stop having consultants come in and tell us that we need to raise rates and double and triple rates and do everything else. We have sufficient funding now. I'd like to beg to differ, to have someone convince me otherwise. I look at the budget like everybody else. We have in excess of $3 million surplus on an annual basis, and we're probably going to have a heck of a lot more because we keep raising rates everywhere else within this utility. And the time, and I'm going from what people have told me, they cannot continue to sustain these increases. And that's fine for a consultant to tell us that this is what we have to do, but that consultant is not paying that bill every month. I am, everybody in this room is, everybody out in the community is, and people cannot afford to sustain these dramatic increases anymore. We have to look at other ways fixing our infrastructure deficit as it relates to water and wastewater management, and there are ways to do it, and it's not about raising lots of money now to pay for it in today's dollars, and that we have lots of other options moving forward, and I would hope that council would have staff look at other options as we go forward. As I say, I'll support this because I don't want to vote against the budget in 2020 on that utility, but I can't continue to support these kind of increases. They are out of this, they're way out of the stratosphere. People cannot afford it anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Van Wallingham?
Okay, a previous council was made aware of the sewer and water infrastructure deficit and realized changes had to be made to the billing model. A consultant was hired, and his recommendations and the provincial laws made it necessary to phase in increased rates for a number of years. That council had pushed back over the increases but stuck with them, just as we are doing, with the end goal being all ratepayers are treated equally in a user pay system. Some residents are seeing a large increase in rates because they were underpaying for years, and the majority were overpaying. These increases will level the playing field, so I will be supporting the motion.
Any further comments? Councillor Ross?
I will also be voting in favor. I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand that there is some need to make sure that we have the proper revenues for any further possibly catastrophic problems with the water system. But I'd like to see an accounting of where we sit. This is a progression. We've done this several times because we're trying to get to that magic point. I'd like to know when we're getting close to that magic point where we can actually start to level off the sewer and water charges. There are other initiatives that are being taken to try and make this better, but one of them being bringing everyone onto the sewer and water system at a fair rate. But the final result, my final point would be that I really would like to see an idea of where we sit in relation to our reserves.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, and Your Worship, I absolutely agree, and I understand where Councillor Poirier is coming from. The rates have been steep. Everybody's feeling them. I believe it's next year, and perhaps Heather can confirm this, that we will be reviewing the report that we've been working on in the past 5 years and looking at how, as Councillor Goss says, what we're looking at with reserves, the infrastructure deficit, and at that time, I would expect that we will be able to get some answers and look at a path forward. And I hope won't be as steep, but I will support this because we have an infrastructure deficit, not only in the wastewater system, all through the system, and we can't ignore it. We would be being diligent councillors if we did.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 7.
Resolution number 7, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wellingham, that council hereby receives the request for inquiry report from Lisa Wheatley, Integrity Commissioner for the City of Kenora.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 8.
Resolution number 8, Your Worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Poirier, that council hereby approves an amended health and safety policy, number HS-07, Health and Safety Responsibilities, Program Coordinator, Health and Safety Policy HS number 08, Posted Health and Safety Materials, Health and Safety Policy number HS-12, Emergency Preparedness, number HS-19, Non-Routine Work Health and Safety Policy number HS-30, Health and Safety Representatives or Committees, and Health and Safety Policy number HS-38, Health and Safety Inspections, and further that bylaw number 27-2012 be hereby repealed, and further that 3 readings be given to the applicable bylaws for the health and safety policies to form part of the city's comprehensive policy manual under the new category health and safety.
Thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 9.
Resolution number 9, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Smith, that council hereby approves an additional allocation of $10,000 to be funded through the roads reserves for additional CCTV works and LDS flushing, and further, that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to amend its 2019 operating and capital budget at its September 17th, 2019 meeting to withdraw additional funds from roads reserve in the amount of $10,000 to offset the cost of this work, and further, that council gives 3 readings to a bylaw to amend the 2019 budget for this purpose.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 10.
Your worship, resolution number 10, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Ralco, that council hereby receives the Kenora Drinking Water Quality Management Standards reaccreditation audit results conducted on May 29th and 30th, 2019 by SAY Global.
Call the question. All those in favor? Anybody want to comment? Okay, carried. Thank you. Resolution number 11.
Your worship, resolution number 11, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor.
Was it me?
I don't, is that yours, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
I saw an M in there. Councilor Goss. That is part of the downtown revitalization phase 4. The council of the city of Kenora hereby renames a portion of the road locally known as First Street South from Chipman Street to Park Street, as shown on the attached imagery, to Thistle Drive, and further that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to adopt a bylaw at its September 17th council meeting renaming the above described portion of road to Thistle Drive.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 12.
Resolution number 12, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Smith, that council hereby approves a reallocation of $16,200 plus applicable taxes to be funded through the 2019 Roads Reserve for the remaining balance of a 2018 unusual spend project that is now nearing completion. And further, that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to amend its 2019 capital budget at its September 17th, 2019 meeting to withdraw funds from the Roads Reserve in the amount of $16,200 plus applicable taxes to offset the cost of this project, and further that council give 3 readings to a bylaw to amend the 2019 budget for this purpose.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 13.
Resolution number 13, your worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Goss. That council hereby approves an amendment to Schedule D of the tariff and fees and charges bylaw to include various amended water and wastewater rate charges, along with routine rate changes for 2020, and further that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to give 3 readings to a new tariff of fees and charges bylaw number at its September 17th, 2019 meeting to give effect to these rates outlined in the revised Schedule D, and further that bylaw number 118-2019 be hereby repealed.
Yes, please.
Your worship, a few comments that I would like to make before we take this vote. 2 years ago, Council of the Day were made aware of a practice that was seen to be arbitrary and discriminatory discriminatory by ratepayers of the water and wastewater utility. In the interest of transparency and to exercise due diligence, staff were directed to report back on the circumstances and, if necessary, make recommendations to remedy the practice. Multiple reports and the recommended changes have been in the public eye for 2 years. It is difficult to believe there are ratepayers that still think this change in policy is a money grab or a tax. Constituents are aware that the policy change is to ensure the principle of the water, wastewater utility, that each household that receives the benefit of a safe and reliable water, wastewater system share in the cost equally. They are aware that several hundred residents pay a fraction of what the majority of residents pay, and that results in the majority subsidizing those few. Additionally, if everyone pays equally into the system, revenues would increase and future increases won't be as steep, and that will benefit those with low income. It is clear that there is no benefit or savings for the utility by buildings and parks that have one line. The costs are made up of the plants, lines, lift stations, staff, and equipment. The principle is clear. If you benefit from the system, you pay into it equally. The problem is that Council has been trying to include equity in this policy by addressing issues such as affordable housing and poverty through this policy. That is not the function of the water and wastewater utility. We are making the situation worse because we are making up policy as we go along. Those issues are addressed in other more relevant policies. For example, our enabling affordable housing policy makes no mention of subsidizing low-income homes to incent housing through the water and wastewater utility. Additionally, local taxpayers, by policy, transfer $1.8 million per year to the Kenora District Services Board for Ontario Works and Social Housing, and an additional $1.6 million to seniors housing. It is the KDSB that administers those programs designed to provide assistance for those living in poverty, not the water and wastewater utility. The best way to ensure equality is to ensure equity is to start with equality. I understand why councillors are struggling with this. None of us want to see our residents living in poverty, trying to pay their bills, feed their kids, and provide for the necessities of life. But it is not and should not be the intent of the policy before us to address those issues. I will be supporting the recommendation by staff.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Poirier?
I request a recorded vote on this motion.
No, is there any further comments, or will just, Councillor Valpo?
So we're voting specifically now in part as it pertains to the Rabbit Lake Trailer Park specifically.
It's all of them, it's all of the multi-unit rates that are now incorporated into the tariff fees and charges. So it's not specifically what they pay, it's all the multi-unit charges. So while the bylaw was passed, the rates are in a separate tariff fees, so this will incorporate all the tariff fees.
We'll call for the recorded vote.
Councillor Goss?
Aye.
Councillor Poirier?
Nay.
Councillor Rockland?
Nay.
Councillor Smith? Councillor Van Wallingham?
Nay.
Mayor Raynard is absent, and Deputy Mayor McMillan.
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Resolution number 14.
Resolution number 14, Your
Just,
Worship.
We just wait.
Resolution number 14, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Poirier. That council hereby approves an additional allocation of $779,842 to be funded through the Art Center capital project funds, which have come solely from senior levels of government and private donations for the construction of the Douglas Family Art Center. And further, that in accordance with notice bylaw number 144-2007, public notice is hereby given that council intends to amend its 2019 operating and capital budget at its September 17, 2019 meeting to withdraw funds from the Art Center capital funds in the amount of $779,842 to offset the cost of this construction and related capital expenses, and further, the council gives 3 readings for a bylaw to amend the 2019 budget for this purpose. And might I point out, Your Worship, that this money that is being transferred is not residential tax dollars. These are monies that have been collected by private donation and senior government. So there is absolutely zero residential tax dollar expended here.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolution number 15.
Resolution number 15, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Poirier, that council hereby approves an extension to the loan agreement between Bryce Douglas and the Lake of the Woods Museum as established in the original agreement authorized by bylaw number 38-2019 in anticipation of adding further objects which are to be included in the original agreement. And further, that the mayor and clerk be hereby authorized to execute the extension to the loan agreement. And further, that 3 readings be given to a bylaw for this purpose.
All those in favor? Carried. Or opposed? Carried. Resolution number 16, please.
Your Worship, resolution number 16, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that council hereby approves an amended ICE allocation policy number CS-1-1 to the city's comprehensive policy manual to assist and guide administration in ensuring there is a fair, transparent, and equitable process to access to prime ice time, and further, that bylaw number 95-2019 be hereby repealed, and further, that 3 readings be given to a bylaw for this purpose.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Resolution number 17, please.
Resolution number 17, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wellingham. Whereas Kenora Bed and Bale submitted an application to the City of Kenora for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment related to 66 Cambrian Drive. And whereas through the submission process, the city became aware of the use of city property in the area of Rabbit Lake and the Rabbit Lake Trails by Kenora Bed and Bale operation, which includes horses on the city lands and trails. And whereas in a July 30th report to council, the city planner conveyed that the Community Services Department would provide a separate report to council on the Bed and Bale's use of city property. And whereas the City Parks Bylaw number 34-2015 prohibits certain animals, including horses, in and on city parks and trails unless authorized in writing by the park supervisor. Therefore, let it be resolved that council directs administration to communicate with the proprietors of the Bed and Bale operation that horses are not permitted on city parks and trails, and further, that the Trails Committee review the requirement for additional signage pertaining to the permitted use on city trails.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 18.
Your Worship, resolution number 18, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wellingham, that council hereby reconfirms the January 2010 resolution declaring Town Island as surplus to the needs of the municipality, and further, that council hereby directs administration to proceed with a competitive RFP process for the sale of Town Island following the receipt of an appraisal on this property.
Thank you. Before I call on Councillor Goss to read the news release, is there any comments or questions? Seeing none, Councillor Goss.
Right. Today, council directed administration to proceed with a competitive expressions of interest process and appraisal of Town Island, a city-owned island just south of Coney Island. Over the past 10 years, the city has investigated the potential transfer of Town Island in exchange for Crown land of equal value within or adjacent to the city boundaries. The intent was to seek properties for residential and recreational land development within the city. In exchange, the province would add the Town Island property into its Lands for Life program, also referred to as the Lake of the Woods Conservation Reserve. More recently, the province has now advised that the former Lands for Life program is no longer active and they no longer have any interest in acquiring the Town Island property. The province has advised the city that the city may purchase surplus properties from the province as they become available. In order to do so, the city needs to have the available financial resources, such as the Town Island property, to potentially purchase these types of property for development. Selling this property will provide the city with the value of that sale for the purposes of future land development within the city limits. The net proceeds will be placed into a reserve fund in which council has the discretion to pursue valuable properties that will help address the strategic challenges facing the municipality, including fostering economic development and generating additional tax revenue.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 19.
That's me. Resolution number 19, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallahem, that council hereby approves a new tree canopy and natural vegetation policy, number D-7-1, which outlines the benefits of protecting and enhancing the tree canopy and natural vegetation in the municipality, and further that council gives 3 readings to a bylaw for this purpose.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 20.
Your worship, resolution number 20, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Wallahem, that council hereby accepts the 2019 second quarter report from the Kenora Fire and Emergency Services Department for the period of April 1st to June 30th, 2019.
Yes, it should.
You want to change it?
Just initial, please. Thanks, Andrew. You want to initial that, Chris? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 21.
Your worship, resolution number 21, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that council hereby adopts the following minutes from the various City of Kenora committees: July 25th, 2019, and August 22nd, 2019 reviews. June 5th, 2019, Environmental Advisory Committee. June 20th, 2019, Tourism Committee. May 7th, 2019, Kenora Police Service Board. July 23rd, 2019, Lake of the Woods Development Commission. And that council hereby receives the following minutes from other various committees: May 30th, 2019, and June 21st, 2019, District of Kenora Home for the Aged Board of Management. June 20th, 2019, Kenora District Service Board, and further that these minutes be circulated and order filed.
Just a short comment. I find these minutes very helpful in keeping up to date with the different committees and what's happening, so really appreciate having them circulated. So call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 22.
Your worship, resolution number 22, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Van Dornham, that council of the city of Kenora hereby accepts the July 2019 Kenora Water and Wastewater Systems Monthly Summary Report as prepared by city administration.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution 23.
Resolution number 23, your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that the tender from Joe Naniska and Sons for the supply, delivery, and stockpile of up to 9,000 tons of screened winter sand be hereby received, and further, that the tender received from Joe Naniska and Sons in the amount of $20 per ton HST extra for the year 2019, $20 per ton HST extra for the year 2020, and $21 per ton HST extra for the year 2021 be hereby accepted.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 24, please.
Your worship, resolution number 24, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Poirier, that the following bylaws be now read a first and second time and approved in their present form and presented for third and final reading. Number 134-2019, confirm the proceedings of council. 135-2019, Health and Safety Program Coordinator Responsibilities Policy. Number 136-2019, Posted Health and Safety Materials Policy. Number 137-2019, Emergency Preparedness Policy. Number 138-2019, Non-Routine Work Policy. Number 139-2019, Health and Safety Representatives or Committee Policy. Number 140-2019, Health and Safety Inspections Policy. Number 141-2019, Budget Amendment, CCTV Works. Number 142-2019, renaming a portion of First Street to Thistle Drive. Number 143-2019, Budget Amendment, Ritchie Road Aggregate Pit Project. Number 144-2019, Budget Amendment, Douglas Arts Center. Number 145-2019, Extension to Douglas Arts Center Loan Agreement. Number 146-2019, Ice Allocation Policy, number CS-1-1. Number 147-2019, Tree Canopy Policy, number DS-7-1.
Would you mind repeating those? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Resolution number 25.
Resolution number 25, your worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Boss, that the following bylaws be now read a first and second time and approved in their present form and presented for third and final reading. Number 119-2019, tariff of fees and charges, Schedule D, 2020 water rates.
Thank you. I call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Resolution number 26.
Resolution number 26, your worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Boss, that the following bylaws be now read first and second time and approved in their present form and presented for third and final reading. Number 119-2019, tariff of fees and charges, Schedule D, multi-unit water rates.
Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I would like to ask if Councillor Goss, Deputy Mayor, could take the chair for this Deputy Mayor, so I may introduce a resolution. Thank you. Was it me? Yeah.
Brian said I'd never get to sit in his chair, but I think we Gary, could you get a photo?
We'll get a picture, Mort.
Big smile.
Your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Ralpho, whereas climate change is currently contributing to billions of dollars in property and infrastructure damage worldwide, stressing local and international economies, and whereas climate change is currently jeopardizing the health and survival of many species and other natural environments worldwide, stressing local and international ecosystems, and whereas climate change is currently harming human populations worldwide and within the Northwest by exacerbating health impacts related to heat stress, air pollution, food and water security and quality, proliferation of insect-borne disease vectors, and through rising sea levels and other extraordinary phenomena like intense wildfires locally, nationally, and among international communities. Whereas recent international research has indicated a need for massive reduction in carbon emissions in the next 11 years to avoid lock-in of warming surpassing 2 degrees Celsius this century, which would guarantee further and devastating economic, ecological, and societal loss. And whereas the climate change in Canada is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world, as per Canada's Changing Climate Report, and whereas there is and will be significant impact on economic development within our immediate area upon the forestry, mining, and tourism sectors due to climate change impacts, and whereas due to the destabilization of historic climate norms and a rise in the intensity and severity of extreme weather and precipitation events, Kenora and the Lake of the Woods area, including the traditional lands of Grand Council Treaty 3 and the Kenora Métis Council, can expect a high likelihood of flooding and shoreline, or may expect a high likelihood of flooding and shoreline erosion with negative consequences for ecosystem health and resilience and the sustainability of future waterfront developments. And whereas Kenora is located within the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe of Treaty 3 and the Kenora Métis Council, climate change does have a significant impact on First Nations and Métis people, their lands and waters, resources, and their way of life. Whereas millions of dollars of infrastructure damages by extreme storm events and increases in freeze cycles are destroying our roads and substructure infrastructure, and whereas increases in the incidence of extreme weather can severely impact power lines, which lead to infrastructure and failures, including water, sewage treatment facilities, and pumping stations. And whereas an emergency can be defined as an often dangerous situation requiring immediate action, and whereas municipalities such as London, Kingston, Vancouver, Hamilton, Wolfville, Nova Scotia, Selkirk, Manitoba, and many other communities throughout Quebec and across Canada have already declared and are considering declarations addressing climate emergencies, and whereas the City of Kenora has a community energy plan and a corporate energy conservation and demand plan as part of its climate mitigation effort, therefore be it resolved that the City of Kenora declare a climate emergency that threatens our city, region, province, nation, civilization, humanity, and the natural world, and further that the Environmental Advisory Committee of Kenora work in partnership with city staff who are engaged in addressing the impacts of climate change and establish a climate change task force comprised of and led by staff and broader community stakeholder participation that includes Grand Council Treaty 3 and the Kenora Métis Council, and that this task force be directed to investigate and identify one, additional actions be taken to incorporate into existing plans and policies to achieve net zero carbon emissions prior to 2050 or earlier. 2, best processes, practices to centralize reporting on climate change for the corporation of the City of Kenora. 3, gaps in current programs and projects and strategies to address those gaps within the strategic planning process. And 4, the establishment of a public education and communication strategy for the purpose of raising awareness, educating about climate change and the history of climate policy and action. 5, work in concert with community partners in both the provincial and federal governments to address mitigation strategies, example in the event of increased frequency and forest fires as a consequence of climate change in our area. 6, the development of a strategic plan to guide the city in addressing the mid-century decarbonization goals. And 7, development of a critical path and terms of reference to initiate community awareness and public education encompass the history of global warming, climate change, and the United Nations Declaration on a Climate Emergency, which is to include the impacts of not taking such action and the investment versus the expense of taking such action. 4, that this task force report back to council within a to be defined period of time. And further, that council supports City of Kenora staff participation on the task force to accelerate climate action across immediate municipal boundaries. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to NOMA requesting that it be circulated to member municipalities to consider a similar action. And further, that this resolution be forwarded to Grand Council Treaty 3 and the Kenora Métis Nation seeking their support and partnership in addressing climate change. And Your Worship, I'm requesting that motion 27 with respect to a notice of motion by myself regarding a climate emergency be hereby amended to remove various aspects of the original notice of motion provided at the August 13th council meeting. So I will not read the first section all over again. Yeah, I apologize. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Ralpho. So I'll just go to the therefore be it resolved section. That the City of Kenora declare a climate emergency that threatens our city, region, province, nation, civilization, humanity, and the natural world. And further, that in order to address the drafting of a climate action plan, Council hereby directs City Administration to develop a plan for moving forward, including identification of work done and strategies implemented to date by the City, key partnerships and required resources, financial and human, for consideration by Council to a future Council meeting to coincide with the 2020 budget cycle. And further, that Council hereby directs that the declaration of a climate emergency be a guiding principle for the City for future decision making, and that any consideration of this guiding principle be included in all future reports to Council in order to assist Council in their decision making. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to NOMA requesting that be circulated to member municipalities to consider a similar action. And further, that this resolution be forwarded to Grand Council Treaty 3 and the Kenora Métis Council seeking their support and partnership in addressing climate change. And Your Worship, this may allowed, I'll make a couple more comments. The reason for, initially the reason for the amendment, suggested amendment to the therefore be a resolve section is primarily to give staff in the city the opportunity and time to review exactly what's required, resources required, and then bring forward a report to both council and budget cycle prior to proceeding with any of the other actions that were mentioned in the resolution. So it's primarily staff element with that
Thank you. On behalf of everybody in the room, I'd like to thank you for cutting to the chase to the therefore be resolved in the second reading. So we're voting on the amended motion. Please state.
At Grand Council Treaty 3 and a Métis Council, we were going to get a hold of them. We'll just give them a copy of it. Shouldn't we be contacting them first before they see it in the resolution?
As a courtesy, I wouldn't disagree with you that it could be. I can contact them, or I'll work with city administration and contact them.
I think it would be good, like,
It's involving them in engaging in the process.
thank you.
Any other further discussion? So we're voting on amendment, or resolution 27A as amended. In favor? And carried.
Didn't even have to read the votes. I think you said it.
Now you gotta arm wrestle me for the chair back. I'm gonna pull a Boris Johnson here.
I wouldn't do that, he's losing. Thanks to council for support of this resolution. Okay. Looks nice and warm.
That's what I thought.
Resolution 28.
Resolution number 28, your worship, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Goss. Whereas the previous council at its May 2018 meeting passed a resolution to repeal bylaw number 79-2016 and amendments to the City of Kenora Site Plan Control Policy BB-5-1. Whereas the reason cited for the repeal was feedback from the investment readiness assessment for a less burdensome application process. Whereas Section 8.4 of the official plan provides clear intent for the city to utilize site plan control to ensure that development in the city is attractive and compatible with adjacent uses. Whereas the consultant and staff noted the requirement is over and above the prescribed process required by the Planning Act, scheduling city staff, developer staff, reserving space, and holding a public meeting does place an increased burden on an applicant. Whereas scheduling city staff is a function of employment and expected, and reserving city space is a minor logistical issue. Whereas land use planning helps a municipality set goals about how it will grow and develop, and to work out ways of reaching those goals while keeping important social, economic, and environmental concerns in mind. Whereas land use planning balances the interests of additional property owners with the wider interests and objectives of the whole community, whereas interest has been expressed by councillors and the public for a public consultation process on several files that have recently come before council. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Kenora reinstate site plan control public consultations to ensure that development in the city is attractive and compatible with adjacent uses, and to provide the public with an opportunity to comment through a public process. And just additionally,
Yes.
if I may,
Please.
additional to Section 8.4 of the official plan that says that development in the city should be attractive and compatible with adjacent uses, and to provide the public with an opportunity to comment through a public process. Section 2.2.9 of the official plan also states under principles of community and Aboriginal engagement, under objectives, ensure that all stakeholders and the public have appropriate and adequate opportunities to participate in planning process. The official plan was prepared with input and consultation from the community, and sections 8.4 and section 2.2.0 are the results of that, or 9 are the result of that input. In the last year, council has requested broader consultation on 4 projects. 3 are Kenora District Services Board projects, 2 supportive housing, and one bail bed project. And we need to reinstate the policy on public consultations. We shouldn't be picking and choosing, and we shouldn't be only picking projects that impact marginalized and poor people. And another example is the bed and bail proposal. It had the potential to significantly impact the neighborhood and community, but many were not made aware of the project and to have the opportunity to express and have their concerns addressed. So planning requirements only prescribe that those within 122 meters of development are advised. The Planning Advisory Committee and Council public consultation is limited in scope, a strict process, and doesn't allow for a more fulsome conversation regarding neighborhood community concerns and mitigation of same. The reasons given by the consultant to do away with public consultations would not create undue hardship for the city. And further, staff have the responsibility to ensure development is not delayed. It's our job to listen to our constituents. It doesn't stop after the election, so I'm hoping that staff will come back with a report that will engage the public more in some of the developments that they want that impacts them. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further comments? Councillor Ralph?
I actually have some clarifying questions for myself. So reinstating the site plan control policy that you're suggesting would create a second meeting basically in addition to planning like the usual planning advisory process, and that meeting is the responsibility of the applicant to organize, not the city?
I'm going to defer to Adam, but I did the applicant and the city that would have that.
Yeah, my understanding, I don't have the hand right here, but my understanding is that EDC applicant does have to have
And do we happen to know offhand what the notification requirements for that are? Obviously, they must be much more far-reaching than the 122 meters that it is now.
yeah, no, I don't think it really contains any specifics related to the notice under the EDC.
practically then, that's our usual notice that's in the Daily Miner and on the website.
Councillor, any further questions? Councillor Smith, I have a question. At the near the end of your presentation, or your comment was that you'd be hopeful that staff would come back to council with a report on how to address and include consultation. And I guess what I'm asking is your request to give staff an opportunity to come back to council with a report to include that, or is it to proceed with changing the existing bylaw at this point?
Yeah, I think that would be fair to staff to be able to go back and revisit that, because they actually, when they did the amendment, there was about 3 sections that came out of there, and there may be valid reasons why we don't have to have public consultation for those, but I think they should review all of them and to make sure that there are some situations that should be coming before council. We've had 4 of them already, and I think in the past year, that to me denotes that there's a need to have those kind of consultations. So how to bring them back in a way that's fair. And just one of them that was actually moved from the policy is if the application has been referred to council and council recommends the public be consulted. Well, we've actually even taken that specific piece out of there. So unless it's been recommended to council, council's asking for these consultations to happen, and really there's no opportunity for that to happen.
Okay. So if I may ask you a question, from a procedural point of view, if there's a request, council will request that this go back to staff to come back with a report to council on how to ensure consultation, would this mean that this would be deferred?
No, council would need to support this resolution, which directs staff
Okay.
to bring a report back and
Okay.
asking for
Okay.
a report to come forward.
So that's specific, I'm just trying to, because it was fairly long, so
Yeah.
I just want to make sure when I'm voting on it, that's the intent of the.
It wouldn't be reinstated here at this meeting because it would be on the couch and it becomes the policy report review. So it would come back to committee of the whole to report through Adam's department. And yeah, whether staff recommends that it is or isn't, that's up to Adam's department. But the report would come forward to Cal. The direction would just be at this meeting that a report come back forward. It's worded in the resolution that we reinstate site plan control, but we can't do that at this meeting. That requires bylaw. So
Is that understood by everyone? Any further questions on it? So,
you vote to support the resolution, which would then have a report.
vote yea or nay on the resolution. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the resolution? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay. We have 2 proclamations. I know I have them somewhere. Yep. I think while I'm waiting for them, I just was remiss in not introducing Zara, who has this is her first day, I believe, with the Minor News, so we welcome you to our council chambers. Yeah.
Tim, why are you laughing like that?
And sometimes you see the old veteran ones like Mr. Davidson, they always have a smile.
And they're always hiding in the back corner.
Okay, we have 2 proclamations. The initial one is Public Rail Safety Week, September 23rd to 2019, or 2019. Whereas Public Rail Safety Week is to be held across Canada and the United States from September 23rd to 2019, and whereas it is in the public's interest to raise citizens' awareness on reducing avoidable accidents, injuries, and damage caused by collisions at level crossings or incidents involving trains and citizens, and whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the rail industry, governments, police services, the media, and other agencies and the public to raise rail safety awareness. And whereas CN has requested City Council adopt this resolution in support of its ongoing effort to save lives and prevent injuries in communities, including our municipality, therefore be it resolved that the week of September 23rd to 29th, 2019 be hereby proclaimed as Public Rail Safety Week in the City of Kenora in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and citizens safe. Proclaimed at the City of Kenora this 17th day of September 2019, signed by Mayor Daniel Raynard. Okay, this second proclamation, commemorating the 150th year since the arrival of the first British home children. Whereas between 1869 and 1948, over 100,000 girls and boys up to the age of 18 were emigrated from the United Kingdom under a government-supported child migration scheme that dispersed the children across Canada to become indentured farm laborers and domestic servants. And whereas most of these British home children experienced loneliness, hardships, and shame, and lost all contact with and knowledge of family members, and whereas as adults, most children choose to make Canada their permanent home, contributing to the building, protection, and development through Canada in times of depression, war, and peace. And whereas today an estimated 4 million descendants continue to live in Canada, including some of whom reside in Kenora and other areas of northwestern Ontario. And whereas the year 2019 marks the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the first party of British home children to Canada, and whereas on September 28th, Canada's National British Home Child Day, close to 100 venues across Canada and the United Kingdom will be participating in the Beacons of Light for British Home Children and Child Migrants tribute as a symbolic gesture to honor the memory of all the children. And whereas it is of interest for all citizens in Kenora and area to gain knowledge of this almost forgotten era of Canadian history in this specific group of children, some of whom were our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the Mayor and Council of the City of Kenora, hereby designate the week of September 21st, 2019 to September 28th, 2019 as British Home Child Week in Kenora. And we invite people to pay tribute to all British home children through education and reflection on the history and stories of this unique group of children and their contributions to our nation. Proclaimed at the City of Kenora this 17th day of September 2019, Mayor Daniel Raynard.
I could comment on that. Yeah, I guess I was going to make it in my comments. The British home children thing, really, I'd always known about it, but it wasn't until I started to, I was approached to be part of a photo opportunity this morning on this by Hillman Brazo. And as I started to think about it, I remembered when we moved here in 1954, my parents, who were always sort of welcoming to the folks at the Christmas table, we always had Christmas orphans, people who didn't have other families. And I, as I was laying in bed one night, I recalled that we had an old friend, an older gentleman by the name of Pops Milsom, who used to pop around to our place at Christmas time. And I remember him telling me, Sonny, as a tyke, I remember I was hauled off from my family and dropped in this country. I've come to love it, but then it went on from there. And it didn't strike me until recently, the horror of this, that children as young as 4, 5, 6 would be yanked from their families, sometimes unknowingly, and for no reason of their own, no cause that was none of their responsibility, and they'd be dumped in this country, as I said, farm laborers or indentured services. So it's a far larger thing than people think of. I know of a few families in Kenora. I've seen some work on Facebook. There are several families in Kenora that have come from British home children, and I think it behooves us to recognize that these people help build our country as well.
Is there any new notice of motion? No. Speak up. Okay, Okay, we'll just go around the table if anyone has any comments or updates to provide. Andrew?
No, I just, a comment about this past Sunday, had the opportunity to participate in the Terry Walks on the walk. And besides having some nice weather finally, the one thing I did notice in that was the amount of young people, students, a little younger, their participation in the walk. And it's also people that I've seen at this over the past several years and that. So I just wanted to say that the organizers did a really good job. I don't know what the final tally is for fundraising that, but I'm sure it's up there at the end of the year. So I just wanted to acknowledge their hard work for organizing.
Well, in keeping with your resolution regarding climate change today, the Kenora Climate Action Network is organizing a rally for climate change this upcoming Friday. Weather permitting, it's going to be from 3 to 6 p.m. right outside City Hall here. All are welcome.
Councillor Smith? Okay. Councillor Don? You did it. Councillor Lemon?
Last week I attended a community safety night down at the Whitecap Pavilion. It was really impressive. Lots of people, everybody who went said they'd come back next year. It's the first one I went to, but I won't miss any more. And in conjunction with that, tomorrow night down up at the fire hall, they're having an open thing for possibly more volunteer firefighters or that. I don't know if Chief Todd would have anything more to comment there, but the only thing I've heard about it is they don't seem to think they get paid, volunteer firefighters. But I think we have to publicize that a little more.
And that's something we, in the media that we've been pushing out there, and the reason it's called volunteer fire because that's what the Act calls it. And really in Ontario, about 97% of volunteer fire departments are paid. There's very few that are truly not paid. So, Longwood was one of them, actually. Maybe not paid, but all municipal volunteers are paid. And so they put a lot of time in, and it's a good way to reimburse them for their efforts. So, tomorrow night, 6:30 to 8:30, everybody's welcome. We'll have cookies and that. What we're going to do is set up some stations throughout the fire station, and just where people can try on PPE and SCBA and look at trucks and look at pumpers and see if it truly fits with what they want to do. We can draw out some more.
Are you going to allow Chris to drive the new
Chris is
ladder?
going SCBA and PPE the whole way. So.
Okay.
Sure.
He's going to drive the aerial truck.
Okay. Thank you. My comments are very brief. I just want to extend appreciation to Heather for her support through this meeting today and guidance, and to my colleagues around the table for their patience. And I truly welcome His Worship back. So, resolution number 29.
Resolution number 29, Your Worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Poirier, that pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended, authorization is hereby given for council to move into a closed session at 1:29 p.m. to discuss items pertaining to the following: education and training members of council, 2 matters.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks. Resolution number 30, please.
Resolution number 30, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Smith, that this meeting be now declared closed at 2:55 p.m.
250 p.m.
Oh, that's true.
All in favor?